Welcome to the Fantasy Football Forge. My name is Steve, and it is Conference Championship week, and I am excited for these matchups. I think there's two really good sets of matchups, and I don't think that we can get a bad Super Bowl out of this either. So, really excited for that. And before I go over a recap of how we've done so far with this series in terms of the betting and my predictions for the games, I will just quick explain what will be in this video if you haven't seen this series yet. It's really a pretty surface level look at some of the advantages and disadvantages that these teams will have against each other, where they may be able to win the games, and where they might end up losing the games. I'll go through some X factors or keys to victories as well after I look at all of these factors that I just spoke of, and you can see the labels right up top there. I will also go over some betting opinions of mine for the over-under, for the point spread, and then for the money line would be just, you can see the predictions down there. So let's first recap how I did last week, and actually just how I've done so far in the playoffs, the wildcard round and last week. In the wildcard round, I went 8-2 on my bets, and I got 5 of the 6 correct winners of each of the games, or the money line bets. Then for the divisional round, the New York Giants versus the Philadelphia Eagles, I said to bet the under at 47 points, and that was correct. And I also said to bet Philadelphia at 7.5 point favorites, or negative minus 7.5. And that was correct. Then for the Dallas and San Francisco game, I said to bet the under at 45.5 points. That was correct. And I said to bet San Francisco at some 4.5 point favorites, minus 4.5, and that was correct. Then for the Jacksonville Kansas City game, I had no bet for the over-under of 52 points. I did not feel comfortable. I thought there was a too wide of an array of possibilities between the two opponents. The game could go off the rails and be really high scoring or not. Maybe thanks to a Patrick Mahomes injury, my slight inclination was to go under on that one. However, I didn't have the gonads to do that. It would have been correct. But anyways, it was a no bet there, so nothing wrong or right with that one. But I did have Jacksonville as +9 in that matchup. I did expect that game to come down to being within a touchdown, and it was. So I was correct there. Then for Cincinnati and Buffalo, I also had a no bet there. Similar story at 50 points. It was just too close to where I had the game total at. And so I had Buffalo at -4 in that game because I did think that Buffalo was going to win. They did not win, and so that was incorrect. So I got 3 of the 4 winners correct then out of those matchups, and all in all, if we include the winners as moneyline bets, then for all of the bets so far in the playoffs, I would be 21-5, so that's pretty awesome. I wish I was a bettor, more so than I am, because I have bet on all of these games, I wouldn't be doing too bad so far. So hopefully you have taken advantage of my advice so far. We will see if that continues. I don't think that I am going to be in the majority for either of my predictions here for the winners, and one of the games, I super on the fence. I don't know how much I agree with it. I've been expecting to pick the other team since the beginning of the playoffs, expecting this to be the outcome here. That is going to be the second-seeded San Francisco 49ers going into the home of Philadelphia, the first seed, who are 2.5 point favorites with a 46.5 point under. Is that right? 45.5 point over-under for that matchup. And so for the bets that I'm going to recommend, I would go under in this matchup. I think it's going to be very similar to the Dallas versus San Francisco game last week in a lot of ways, and so ultimately I think the chances of this being lower scoring are higher than it being an all-out shootout kind of matchup. That could be fun too, but I would go with the under here odds-wise. And then I have San Francisco at +2.5 as my bet because I do have them as the predicted winners here. Now, the first factor that we will take a look at, maybe take into play in terms of the ultimate decision making here, is going to be the implied point totals from Vegas due to that over/under and the -2.5 for Philadelphia, which comes to Philadelphia at 24 points, San Francisco at 21.5 points. So that is going to be advantage to Philadelphia. But I do want to point out, the home teams pretty much get spotted 3 points for Vegas. That's a general way of looking for it. So Vegas really has this as Similar to me, they're on the fence here as far as whether it would be San Francisco or Philadelphia winning this game, and maybe even leaning in favor of San Francisco if you really want to look at it that way. Now, the first factor that we're going to look at is going to be the amount of plays that we are expecting for each of these teams to run in this game, given this matchup. And what you will see over here, I've done for this one too, is what you're seeing in each of these 6 matchups here, where I have like 27th versus the 11th. That would be the 27th offense in passing attempts, for the entirety of the league. So out of 32 teams, they would have been ranked 27th, not good. And defensively, going up against the 11th best defense, so good there. So low, good, low, good, but bad for that offense is the way to look at these. And so I've done the same thing here, and both of these offenses, no. Philadelphia tends to run a lot more games than San Francisco. San Francisco's defense is quite good. Both of these defenses are top 10 defense in terms of limiting the amount of plays that are run against them in any given week on average. And ultimately, however, San Francisco doesn't run a whole lot of plays. And so it just leans in favor here of Philadelphia at 63.4 total plays run in this game is the expectation over the 62.1 for San Francisco, 0.4 for Philadelphia. When looking at the passing game, we're going to start already to see some similarities in these offenses. Neither one of them very well ranked as far as the amount of passing attempts that they have per game, 24th, 27th here. But defensively, Philadelphia teams don't tend to pass against them a whole heck of a lot. They're ranked 11th. And so, obviously, 23rd ranked defense for San Francisco ends up being in favor of Philadelphia here by a decent little margin, 33.05 attempts per game. We would expect to see Philadelphia throw the ball that many times this week, whereas we would expect about 31.25 times on average for San Francisco, given this matchup and given how they perform throughout the season. Now, when looking at that passing attack and how explosive those offenses at least attempt to be, yards per attempt, we would see that both teams have, they're the top 2 teams in yards per attempt. Philadelphia the first and San Francisco the second. Philadelphia's defense is the first-ranked defense in this category, whereas the San Francisco defense being ranked 11th does create quite a huge separation. The 11th ranked defense here is much closer to being in the middle of the pack for the NFL, anywhere from, let's pull a number out of our butts here, 9th to the 21st ranked team are all probably going to be fairly similar. But oftentimes, first ranked teams in any category have a bit of a separation between others, and this does create a huge difference. Well, relatively huge difference with Philadelphia's at 7.25 yards per attempt in this matchup, whereas San Francisco, we'd only expect them to average about 6.7 yards per attempt against Philadelphia. So obviously, that's a point in favor of Philly for the passing attack as well. However, when it comes down to it, what matters in these matchups is going to be touchdowns, and we are seeing that San Francisco does hold a marginal lead over Philadelphia in this category. Both really good defenses, both top 10 defenses there, but San Francisco's offense a little better. They're ranked 6th offensively for passing touchdowns on average per game, and that leads to a difference of 0.1 passing touchdowns per game ultimately between these two, so not a big difference there. That's enough of the passing attack. Let's look at the rushing attack, and we are going to see that it's pretty much a dead heat here in terms of how often these teams run each and every game, and especially when it's these offenses against these defenses, it comes out to a difference of 0.1. So 27.9 attempts per game is what we would expect on average between these two teams for San Francisco. But for Philadelphia, we would expect 27.8 attempts in this game on average. So very, very close neck and neck there in the rushing game. But who's going to be more efficient? Who has more yards per attempt in the rushing attack? Who are we expecting to do better in this matchup specifically? And that would be the 12th ranked offense, San Francisco, over the 10th ranked offense in Philadelphia, because San Francisco's defense is the 2nd ranked defense. Philadelphia's defense, not so great, ranked 24th in this category. And so that creates a bit of a separation in favor of San Francisco for the rushing attack. And this is really going to be an area where I think this could help determine the game. Philly's going to need to be locking down against the rushing attack in order to help prevent San Francisco from ultimately flipping the script here and running more plays and just holding the time of possession being in their favor. I think that's going to be a huge determining factor in this game. I've already covered two of the X factors here now with at the start of this rushing attack, but what really matters here is touchdowns. You got it. And this is going to go in favor of Philadelphia. They are the best in the league when it comes to the amount of rushing touchdowns that they get in most games, going up against really good defense. San Francisco's defense ranks 7th. And you know what? San Francisco's offense isn't so shabby in the rushing department either, but this ends up being very close. It's 1.25 rushing touchdowns for Philadelphia compared to 1.05 rushing touchdowns that we would expect for San Francisco in this matchup against one another. This was almost green here for Philadelphia, very close to being a full advantage, but it's a narrow advantage nonetheless here. Then when it comes to the special teams department here for field goals, this is going to be in favor of San Francisco. We would expect them to get 1.5 field goals on average in this matchup, whereas we're really going to, round that down here. We're only expecting Philadelphia to make 1 field goal per game. However, that being said, you will notice I have Philadelphia for most likely more than 1 field goal here at 20 points, and that is because I follow Las Vegas's lead and I spot the home team's 3 points before I start looking at the maths and figuring out who I want to, how I'm going to end up divvying up the points and who I have winning. And these matchups are so close that I couldn't just go purely on the math. I think both of them basically came to ties if I just would have gone based on averages. So, I had to make some decisions and think about the game flow of how these games go, and I'm going to ultimately give the tiebreaker oftentimes to the team who's better in the turnover department. I think we see that in both of these matchups, and both teams, San Francisco and Philadelphia, are great in terms of their average turnover margin per game, both in the high positive numbers, San Francisco at plus 0.08 and Philadelphia plus 0.5. So that is a point in favor, a full advantage here for San Francisco. They also have more turnovers on average per game. 1.8 is what they create compared to Philadelphia's 1.6 that they create on average throughout the year. So definite point in favor of San Francisco, and it's really going to come down to Brock Purdy, I think, and of course Philly's defense. But how are they going to win in this turnover battle? Well, it's in part going to be Brock Purdy not playing like he played last week. If Brock Purdy comes out and plays like he did last week, and I do think that Philadelphia's defense can do a lot of these same things ultimately that Dallas does to frustrate quarterbacks. If Purdy looks like he did last week and gives Philadelphia's defense those same opportunities, puts the ball right in their hands, I think twice, I don't expect San Francisco to end up winning this game. But that was a great tune-up for San Francisco last week for this matchup. I think Brock Purdy will be able to have learned from that experience and watch tape and see some things that he needs to do better and things that he needs to not do when faced with a forced error type situation. And on top of that, too, I do think that we see a little bit of a difference in terms of the defense against the run, which should help San Francisco to be a little bit more comfortable in this game. So I do have San Francisco winning 23-20, and like I said, leading up into this matchup, it's super close for me. I really expected to have Philadelphia winning this, but I'm going with Purdy. So we'll see how that works out. Philadelphia is a super good team, and it'll be sad to see either of these teams lose. I think they're both enjoyable to watch for different reasons. So now let's look at the AFC Conference Championship matchup, and that is going to be the third-seeded Cincinnati Bengals going into the home of the first-seeded Chiefs, where we will see Chiefs being 1-point favorites, -1 there as you can see, and the over-under for this game is 47.5 points. So betting-wise, I am going to take Cincinnati at +1 because I do have them winning I guess -1. I have them in. So ultimately have the injury here for Patrick Mahomes really killing KC and giving the slight advantage overall in this game to Cincinnati to win it. Pretty sure if Mahomes was healthy, I would not have this as the outcome, but I do. So we're going to bet Cincinnati at +1, and and by the way, these betting odds might be different now, and I'm sorry if that's the case. I did take these betting odds early in the week to start the prep work for this video. And the over-under was 47.5, and we're going to go with the under there as well. Once again, probably won't be the same story if Patrick Mahomes was healthy, but also the betting lines would be different if he were. So yeah, that's what I'm betting. And of course, money line, I'd go Cincinnati as well there, as I do have them winning this game and meeting San Francisco for the Super Bowl, which would be a cool game. Probably not the one that any of us would have expected coming into the playoffs, but also not a total surprise. So what are some of the advantages that these teams have against each other? Just looking at the implied point total, according to Vegas, we've got Kansas City with a slight advantage here with an implied point total of 24.25 points compared to Cincinnati's 23.25 points. When we start looking at the amount of plays per game, how much do we think that what's the odds that these teams might be able to control the ball and get time of possession working in their favor? That's going to go in favor of Cincinnati by a fair margin. This might be, if it's not the largest, it might be like the second largest difference here between two teams that I've seen. So we have Cincinnati at 65.25 plays compared to Kansas City's 63 and almost a half plays. Doesn't sound like a huge difference, but when you average all the games together, the NFL, the teams are more alike than they're different from one another. So that is a pretty big difference there. Cincinnati gets the point here in the plays per game department and the opportunity to really control this game. Now, how are they going to do that? Well, you'll see they don't have a whole lot of advantages here, but some of these advantages are going to be shifting a little bit, in my opinion, with the Mahomes injury, with that issue of mobility, especially in this second passing category. But first, looking at the passing attempts, you see both offenses very similar. Cincinnati's defense, however, a fair bit better than the Kansas City defense. And that creates a difference in passes per game of not a huge difference, 36.6 for Kansas City, 37.15 for Cincinnati. So just outside of being a yellow dot here. And I think that was the case for several of these. They were pretty close to being yellow colored advantages, but they're just far enough that they weren't. I don't have an exact line, but I try to keep it all fair. So now when we do look at that yards per attempt in the passing game category, it is going to be now a point in favor of Kansas City. These things tend to go a little bit hand in hand. If you pass the ball a lot of yards per attempt, usually you're going to have fewer passes in the game than probably, as long as you're successful on enough of those attempts. And so we are going to see Kansas City's offense is ranked 3rd in this category, and the defense is ranked 15th for Cincinnati. A little bit different than the 9th versus 6th matchup that we see here in Cincinnati. However, I do think this is an area that might end up being at least equalized with the injury to Mahomes, expecting him to be passing on average 7.3 yards. No. 7.9 yards down the field. 7.3 would have been Joe Burrow's average pass yards per attempt. Now, looking at the touchdown category, what really matters, of course, both teams ranked 1 and 2 here on offense in terms of passing touchdowns per game, but we do see that Kansas City's defense is the worst ranked in the league. They allow the most touchdowns on average to the opponents each and every week. And so Cincinnati does get the advantage for the passing touchdown department here, averaging, this is the highest I've seen all playoffs here, averaging or at least the expectation in this matchup would be that Cincinnati will get exactly 2 passing touchdowns in this game, whereas Kansas City only expecting 1.75, so it could round that up to 2 if you wanted to, but obviously odds are in favor a little bit for Cincinnati here. Then, as far as the rushing attempts go in the rushing game, we're going to see Kansas City going to take a bit of a lead there. Very, very similar on both sides of the ball here in terms of this matchup. Ends up being a difference of a fair little difference. Those Cincinnati rushing attempts would expect 24.7 to, maybe not as fair of a difference, to Kansas City's 25.2. So that's another one of those where I almost could have made that yellow, but it did not. Then in the yards per attempt category, the efficiency for the running attack, we're going to see once again Kansas City gets that advantage. Although Cincinnati's defense is better against the rushing attack, Cincinnati's offense really has not been very efficient on the ground this season. However, last week, they were pretty efficient on the ground, and so if they can continue that this week, that's going to be huge. So that's, I believe, Cincinnati rushing efficiency, one of my X factors there, or keys to victory for Cincinnati. and just another one of those things that could flip in favor of Cincinnati in this game. Now, when we look at the touchdown department, what matters, we're going to see that Kansas City is going to take the lead here. 9th ranked offense compared to Cincinnati's 17th ranked offense for rushing touchdowns. Defensively, Kansas City pretty locked down on the rushing touchdowns. And Cincinnati, not too shabby, ranked 12th, middle of the pack-ish, a little better than middle of the pack there. So that leads to 0.85 is the expectation of rushing touchdowns for Kansas City, 0.75 for Cincinnati. Not a huge difference. Not a big factor in this game, but if Cincinnati can make that an advantage, make this a factor in the game, that'll go a long ways too, and help to potentially put Kansas City into push their backs to the wall and maybe cause some forced errors with that whole injury thing to Mahomes, expecting that to make this a close game almost no matter what. Then in the field goal department, Kansas City takes the lead here, but more importantly, for turnovers, we're going to see that as a factor that's in favor of Cincinnati on the season-long scale. The turnover margin being plus 0.4 per game over the season, whereas Kansas City's is a negative 1/10 per game. Now, looking at some of the X factors here, how does Kansas City win? Well, if Patrick Mahomes is limited, as I'm really expecting him to be, I just can't imagine him coming out and looking even like he did last week. That was adrenaline and a shot at halftime or whenever they gave him a shot that would have really helped him to be able to get through that game. They're doing everything they can to get him up to speed and healthy for this matchup, but ankle sprain usually takes guys out for some time. So if that's the case, if he's limited, really think that his skill players are going to need to make up for that in this game and get some yak. Really just catch that ball and get some yards after they get that catch. It's going to be very important. My voice kind of skipped on yak. I don't know how much that would have been picked up there, so explain what I'm talking about. Yards after the catch. Then for Cincinnati, we already went over that the rushing efficiency will be huge. So offensively, I think that's going to be a big factor. Of course, we know what we're asking for on offense from these teams, generally speaking. But if Cincinnati can be efficient on the ground, huge. And then on defense, I think we saw it last week here, and I don't expect Kansas City to come in with some sort of same game plan exactly as what they ended up going with last week after the Mahomes injury. But Kelsey's always part of that. And so if they can get that connection, just get that timing off, knock Kelsey off, frustrate him throughout the game, I think that in turn will frustrate Mahomes and cause some potentially forced errors with Mahomes having to go other places. Easier said than done. We know that. But if it's a more condensed, shorter passing attack, if Mahomes has to get that ball out sooner due to his lack of mobility, it makes it just a little bit easier for a defense to try to lock down a guy like Travis Kelce and take him out of the game, so to speak, to whatever extent you can take a Kelce out of the game. So that is it for these matchups. Really looking forward to them. I have Cincinnati winning 24-23, in case I didn't say that yet. And anything can happen this weekend. So good luck with the betting. Hope if you listen to me, it works out like it has been so far this playoff season. Bye-bye.